Think taking pictures is a career? That's the most embarrassing thing I've ever heard you say. My mother said it the way she said everything, like a verdict, not a question, not a concern, a verdict. I was 23. I had just told her I was leaving my accounting job at the firm downtown to photograph full-time. I had saved 8 months of salary. I had 3 clients already lined up. I had the plan, a real one, typed out, numbers included. She didn't ask to see it. She set down her coffee cup, looked at me the way you look at something stuck to the bottom of your shoe, and said, "You're not serious. You cannot be serious right now." I was sitting at the kitchen table where I'd done homework since the 4th grade. The same table where she'd made me practice flashcards for the SAT. The same table where she'd told me at 17 that I needed to think carefully about my future because dreams were what people talked about when they didn't want to do the real work. "I am serious," I said. That was the wrong answer. My father walked in from the garage just as her voice went cold. He heard enough. He set his keys on the counter and didn't look at either of us. My older brother was upstairs. I could hear his TV through the ceiling. No one came downstairs. No one said a word in my direction for the rest of the night. The next morning, my mother slid an envelope across the table. "Your father and I talked," she said. "If you leave that firm, you leave this house. We're not funding a hobby." I read it twice. It wasn't a letter. It was a list of monthly expenses she'd calculated: rent equivalent, grocery average, health insurance premiums, phone bill, all the things they'd been quietly covering or subsidizing for years without ever mentioning it as leverage until now. Underneath the numbers, she'd written, "We love you. This is not the path." I folded the paper in half, put it in my back pocket, and went upstairs to pack. I want to be clear about something because I've thought about this a lot in the years since. I don't think my mother is a villain. I think she grew up watching her own parents struggle, watching money disappear, watching dreams get people nowhere. She married my father at 22, had my brother at 24, had me at 26, and spent the next 30 years making sure every bill was paid on time. That kind of life leaves marks. It teaches you that security is the only thing you can actually trust. I understand that now. But understanding something doesn't mean it didn't hurt. I left with 2 duffel bags, my camera equipment, and my laptop. I had enough saved to cover 3 months of rent in a city that was not cheap. I found a 1-bedroom in a part of Nashville that my mother would have described as concerning, and my brother would have called a step above a storage unit. The bathroom had a window that didn't close all the way. The radiator made a sound at 2 in the morning that I eventually learned to sleep through. My first week there, I cried every night, not because I doubted myself, at least not entirely, because I missed the version of my family I'd believed in, the version where they might not understand, but they'd show up anyway. They didn't call. I didn't call either. I want to tell you that I had a clear plan and executed it perfectly, but that's not how it happened. The first 3 clients paid, then one of them had a family emergency and postponed indefinitely. The second paid for the wedding and then disputed the invoice after the fact, said the lighting wasn't what they expected, even though they'd approved every shot. I ended up settling for half just to stop the back and forth. The third became my first real referral. Her cousin hired me. Her cousin's coworker hired me. I did 3 weddings in 1 month and came out the other side exhausted, but technically profitable, which felt like a miracle and a threat at the same time. I started a food photography side practice because Nashville's restaurant scene was growing faster than the photographers serving it. I charged $400 for a half-day shoot and thought I was being bold. Within 6 months, I was turning down jobs at $400 because I'd raised my rate to $900. 6 months after that, I was at $1,800 for editorial work and had a waiting list. I opened a business checking account. I started an LLC. I hired a part-time assistant, a 20-year-old photography student named whoever she was, someone who believed in the work the same way I did when I was her age. I did not call my parents to tell them any of this. I'm not sure why, exactly. Pride, probably. Fear that they'd find a way to minimize it. Some part of me that still needed to prove it was real before I could hand them the chance to take it apart. In year 2, a local magazine commissioned a feature on Nashville's emerging food scene. My photos ran across 8 pages. The art director sent me an email afterward that I read so many times I basically memorized it. She said the spread was some of the best commercial food work she'd seen from a photographer under 30. She asked if I was represented. I wasn't. I signed with an agency 3 months later. The work shifted after that. Less weddings, more editorial. Travel started to factor in. A shoot in Portland, one in Charleston, a 2-week project in Austin that turned into a recurring relationship with a hospitality group that owned 12 properties across the South. The hospitality group became my largest client. Over the next year and a half, they paid me more than I'd made at the accounting firm in 2 years. I bought a used Jeep. Not new, used, but mine. I maxed out my Roth IRA contribution for the first time. I started putting money into a brokerage account and actually understanding what I was doing with it. I felt like a person who lived in the present tense. I got a text from my brother on a Tuesday afternoon while I was editing a shoot in my apartment. It said, "Hey, Mom's been asking about you, just thought you should know." That was it. No, "How are you?" No, "Sorry it's been so long." Just that, floating in a text thread that had been silent for over 2 years. I stared at it for a while. Then I put my phone face down and finished the edit. I didn't respond for 4 days. When I did, I wrote back, "Thanks for letting me know." He didn't reply. 3 weeks later, my mother called from a number I didn't recognize. She must have known I wouldn't answer her regular number. I let it go to voicemail. She sounded different, quieter. She said she'd been thinking about things and that she missed me and that she hoped I was doing well. She said my father wasn't doing great, he'd had some health stuff, nothing critical, but it had made her think. She said she didn't want things to stay like this. I listened to it twice, then I saved it and didn't call back. I'm not proud of that, but I needed time to think about what I actually wanted, separate from the guilt and the years and the version of myself that still wanted her to just say she was sorry. A call came in November of that year from a creative director at a lifestyle brand headquartered in Atlanta. They'd seen my editorial work, specifically a series I'd done for a boutique hotel group, and they wanted to talk about a long-term content partnership. Their campaign budget for the following year was structured around 3 lead photographers. They wanted to know if I was available. I was available. The contract came through in December. I read it 4 times before I signed it. The annual retainer was more than I'd made in my first 3 years combined. I bought a house in East Nashville in the spring, not a rental, not an investment property I was talking myself into. A house, mine, with a backyard big enough to have people over, a kitchen I could actually cook in, and a studio space on the ground floor that I had built out exactly the way I'd imagined it since I was 23, sitting in a bathroom with a window that didn't close all the way. Closing day, I drove there alone. I sat in the driveway for about 10 minutes before I went inside. I didn't call anyone. I didn't post anything. I just sat there and let it be real. My mother found out about the house the way I should have predicted, through someone who knew someone. Nashville isn't as big as it thinks it is. A friend of my aunt's had seen my work somewhere, looked me up, mentioned it at a family dinner I hadn't been invited to. My mother called my direct number that time. I answered. She asked if it was true that I'd bought a house. I said yes. She asked where. I told her the neighborhood. There was a pause. "That's a nice area," she said. "I know," I said. Another pause. "I owe you an apology," she said. I had imagined this moment so many times. In my imagination, it felt like a door opening. In real life, it felt more like standing in the rain, waiting to see if it was going to stop or get worse. "Okay," I said. "I should have trusted you. I didn't, and I was wrong about what you were capable of, and I'm sorry I said the things I said when you left." She didn't say she'd been wrong about photography. She didn't say she understood it now. She said she was sorry for the way she'd treated me, and she said it without qualifications, and I realized I didn't need the rest of it as much as I thought I did. We talked for 45 minutes. It was not comfortable. It was not the reunion scene I'd written in my head. But it was honest, and honesty had been missing from that relationship for so long that even the uncomfortable version of it felt like progress. I told her I wanted to take it slowly. She said she understood. My father had been dealing with a back injury that had kept him off work longer than expected. He was a contractor, had been since before I was born. The kind of man who built things with his hands and didn't talk about money unless it was going well. When it stopped going well, He didn't talk about it at all. My mother told me during our second call that they were behind on the mortgage. Not in danger of losing the house yet, but behind in the way that becomes real trouble fast if nothing changes. My brother had offered to help, but he had his own family now, his own mortgage. 2 kids under 5. He couldn't absorb it. She wasn't asking me for anything. She was telling me I want to be fair to her about that. She was telling me the way you tell someone the truth, when you've decided that honesty matters more than appearances. But I knew what she was telling me for. I sat with it for a week. I talked to exactly one person about it. My assistant, who had by then become a real friend, someone who'd watched me build this whole thing from close enough to have an opinion worth hearing. She said, "Whatever you decide, make sure it's your decision and not your guilt." That was good advice. Here's what I decided. I offered to bring my parents current on the mortgage, not to pay it off, not to take it over, not to become their financial solution indefinitely, to get them current, which would give them breathing room, and to set up a separate conversation about what the plan was going forward. I wrote down the conditions before I called her back, not because I was being cold about it, because I needed to be clear about what I was doing and why, so I could stand behind it without second-guessing myself at 2 in the morning. I told my mother I would help with the mortgage on 2 conditions. First, that she and my father sat down with a financial advisor. I offered to pay for it, to make a real plan for their income and expenses, not suggestions. A meeting with someone who knew what they were talking about. Second, that we were honest with each other going forward. No more letting years pass in silence. If something was wrong, we said it. If I was doing well, she got to know. If she was scared, she could call me. She cried. Not the kind of crying I'd expected, not grateful crying or guilty crying. She cried the way people cry when they've been holding something for too long and someone finally noticed. "I don't know how you turned out this way," she said. "What way?" I asked. "Sure of yourself," she said. "I never taught you that." I thought about it for a second. "You kind of did," I said, "just not on purpose." My father called me that weekend. He and I had never been the talking type. Our relationship had always been built more on showing up to the same places than on actual conversation. He asked about the house. I told him about the studio. He asked a lot of technical questions about the construction, what kind of lighting I'd put in, how the walls were finished, whether I'd had to reinforce the floor for the equipment. It was the most we'd talked in years. He said near the end of the call that he was proud of me, not of what I'd accomplished exactly, of the way I'd done it. I didn't say anything for a moment. I wasn't sure what to do with that. "Thanks, Dad," I said. "Don't make it weird," he said. I laughed. It was the first time I'd laughed on a phone call with my father in I didn't know how many years. My brother and I met for lunch the following spring. His idea. He drove up to Nashville on a Saturday, just the 2 of us, and we ate at a place downtown and talked for 3 hours. He apologized for going quiet. Not for taking our parents' side, exactly, but for disappearing. He said he hadn't known how to be in the middle of it and had chosen to not be anywhere instead. I told him I understood that. I did understand it, but I also told him that understanding it didn't mean it hadn't cost me something, and that I needed him to know that if it happened again with this or anything else, I wasn't going to wait 2 years for a one-line text. He nodded. He said, "Fair." That was enough for me. People ask me sometimes, not often, but sometimes, whether I wish I'd handled things differently. Whether there was a version of this where I stayed in contact, kept the peace, didn't make it such a clean break. Honestly, no. Not because I enjoyed the years of silence, not because being estranged from your family is something you just get over or stop thinking about. I thought about it constantly, at the holidays especially, and in the small, unexpected moments, like when I got the magazine spread and had nobody to call. But I think if I had stayed, if I had absorbed the disapproval and kept showing up and let their version of what I was supposed to be sit over my life like weather, I don't think I would have built what I built. Not because I needed their rejection to succeed, but because I needed the space to be entirely, uncomplicatedly sure that I was doing this for myself. No audience. No one to win over. Just the work. The work ought to be mine because I made it mine. and I got to be sure it was real before I handed it to anyone else to have an opinion about. I drove my mother to see the house for the first time this past April. She stood in the kitchen for a long moment, not saying anything. Then she walked into the studio and looked at the lighting I'd built in. The seamless backdrop, the shelves of equipment I'd accumulated over 4 years of doing this seriously. She picked up a lens cap, put it back down. "Tell me what this one does," she said, pointing to a camera body on the shelf. I told her. She listened the way she'd always listened to things that mattered to her, completely, without interrupting, with that particular focused expression that I'd grown up watching her use for legal briefs and budget spreadsheets, and everything she'd decided was worth her full attention. It turned out photography was worth it. It just took her a while to get there. We had coffee on the back porch after. The light was good. Late afternoon, coming in at that angle that makes everything look like it's been chosen. My mother sat across from me and wrapped both hands around her mug and said, "I like it here." "Me too," I said. And that was true. There's something I didn't understand when I was 23, standing in that kitchen with 2 duffel bags that I understand now. The people who love you the most can still be completely wrong about you, and the way you respond to that, not with bitterness, not with the need to prove them wrong loudly, but with quiet, sustained effort over a long stretch of time, that's the thing that actually shapes who you become. My mother wasn't trying to break me when she slid that envelope across the table. She was trying to protect me the only way she knew how, with the tools she'd been given, inside a framework where security meant one specific path and everything else was risk. She wasn't cruel, she was afraid. And fear, when it's in charge of someone who loves you, can do more damage than indifference ever could, because it comes wrapped in certainty. I spent 2 years being angry about that. I think that was fair. But I also spent those 2 years working, and that's the part that mattered more in the end. What I've come to believe, not because someone told me, but because I lived it, is that how you treat the work, when no one is watching, is the whole thing. Not the talent, not the connections, not the lucky break. When I was shooting food in Nashville restaurants for $400 a day, nobody knew my name. My mother didn't know. My brother didn't know. There was no audience for any of it. And that meant every decision I made, to raise my rate, to sign with an agency, to turn down the jobs that didn't fit, had to come entirely from my own judgment, my own sense of what was right and what was worth it. That's what I mean when I say character is built in private. Integrity isn't something you perform for people who are watching. It's what you do when the only person who will ever know is you. And then there's the intelligence part, not book intelligence, not credentials, not the degree my mother had mapped out for me. I mean the kind of intelligence that asks, what is actually happening here, and what does it require? When my father called that Saturday and asked about the camera equipment, I could have turned it into a moment. I could have made him feel the years of silence. Instead, I just answered his questions. Because I was smart enough to recognize that what he was offering, and the only language he had, was an olive branch, and accepting it didn't cost me anything real. The hardest part was learning to hold 2 things at once, to let my family back in without letting them back into the place where their opinions had power over my decisions. That's a line you have to draw yourself. Nobody draws it for you. My mother stood in my studio last April and asked me to explain a camera. I watched her listen, really listen, the way she used to listen to things she'd decided mattered, and I thought, this is what it looks like when someone changes. Not a grand apology, not a dramatic reversal, just a person, paying attention to something they'd dismissed before, deciding it was worth understanding. That cost her something too. I try to remember that. The thing I want people to take from this isn't that following your passion guarantees a good outcome. It doesn't. What it guarantees is that whatever outcome you get is actually yours, built on your choices, your effort, your judgment about what mattered and what didn't. I built a glass house, and I left the door open.